Hi, everyone. I'm glad you're here because today's episode is a doozy. Today, I have three stories that nearly shattered everyone involved as they tried to rationalize what happened to them. Just wait until you hear what you're about to hear. So, if you're enjoying the channel, don't be invisible. Let us know you're out there and smash that subscribe button so we can always be together. Thanks. Now, let's get into the stories. For the longest time, I thought it was a dream. It took me nearly 20 years to discover that it had been real all along. I was about 10 or 11 when I dreamed about the creature. The dream took place in the forest behind my grandparents' house. When they retired, they moved out into a rural area of North Carolina, and my family drove down to visit a few times a year. The year of the dream, we were up at their house for Labor Day weekend. As with every visit, I spent a lot of time playing in the woods, sometimes by myself, sometimes with cousins. The forest was massive, so I'd only ever seen bits and pieces of it. Part of that weekend is hazy, but I do clearly remember running up to my parents on the patio one day, screaming about something I saw in the woods, a horrible monster. And I remember them trying to calm me down, telling me that it was just a dream. I argued with them, of course, swearing that I hadn't been asleep, but eventually I started to believe them, especially as the years went on. Since it was many months before we visited them again, by the time we returned, I went back into the woods convinced that it had not been real. The weird thing was, I could still picture everything perfectly. In the dream, I was in a clearing deep in the woods. There was a little pond in the middle, and a tree that was gnarled and bent nearly in half. Years later, I could have drawn that clearing. I remembered it that well. And the creature, well, I could remember that too. I thought it was a wolf at first, when I saw it in the trees at the edge of the clearing. But then it had charged at me, running on just its two back legs like a man. It snarled at me like a wolf, but even being that young, I knew that it wasn't a normal wolf. Terrified, I ran out of that clearing like a madman, convinced that I was being chased by this dog-like creature. And that's when the dream ended. The next thing I knew, I was crying to my parents. Over the many years of visits, I had never seen that clearing before, convincing me more than ever that it had been a dream. 18 years later, I was visiting again. My grandma was selling the house, getting ready to move into a nursing home. We were all there to help her pack everything up and clean the place up for showings. I brought my fiancé along for some extra muscle, and we spent the weekend there. Saturday afternoon, we decided to take a walk in the woods as a break from working in the house. Obviously, it had been years since I'd done that, and a lot had changed. So pretty quickly, we entered an area that I wasn't familiar with. We weren't worried about getting lost, we were just wandering around aimlessly. And then after walking maybe half an hour, we came to a spot that immediately sent a chill down my spine, and I got goosebumps. My fiancé went to check out the pond, looking to see if there were fish in it or anything cool. And I had a feeling of déjà vu. I spun around, taking it all in to see if I could figure out if we were there. And then I saw the tree, old and withered, the branches bent nearly to the ground. It all came rushing back. My dream. It was the exact clearing from my dream. But seeing it all made me wonder if maybe I really had been in this spot that day, and that it hadn't been a dream at all. I was freaking out, and my fiancé asked me what was wrong. I told him about my supposed dream and especially how it ended. Kindly, he tried to work me through it, saying that it had probably just been my young mind playing tricks on me. He asked me where the creature had supposedly come from, and I pointed. He went to explore that side of the clearing, and I reluctantly followed him, only because I didn't want to be separated. We walked into the woods where I had seen the creature, and at first it seemed normal, but then we realized how quiet it was. We'd been hearing birds the entire walk, but now it was silent. And then we found the carcasses, the skeletons. There were multiple rotting mammal bodies scattered around the area. He still claimed that it had been a normal animal I'd seen that day, but he was much more cautious as we turned to leave. As we walked back toward the clearing, we saw the claw marks high on the tree, well above our heads. I pointed them out, asking what animal could have made those so high up on the tree. But he didn't have an answer. Without discussion, we picked up our pace, nearly running for the clearing. We were almost there when I heard the growl. It came from behind us. I turned to look back and I saw a fur-covered feature with a snout dripping with saliva, dark amber eyes, somehow both human and not at the same time. Its head was at least a foot higher than mine. We sprinted out of there, crossing the clearing without stopping. We continued running until we got back to the house. We now both knew, without a doubt, that I had not dreamed my first encounter. At least now I had a witness for the second one, even though my fiancé seems just as confused as I was the first time. Let's just say that any reservations about selling Grandma's house were now completely gone. Western Pennsylvania, April 2018. I'm a professional photographer. I have been for 8 years now, and I love it. I shoot weddings, engagement photos, family portraits, and more. I've gone all over the city and the tri-state region in that time, finding cool places to serve as backdrops for photos. Sometimes the clients show me new places too, and I use them again later if they provide a good aesthetic. I'll go pretty much anywhere. Abandoned buildings and overgrown areas make for really interesting pictures, so I go there a lot, as do remote parks and industrial areas. The only place I won't go, though, is the old abandoned tunnel. The tunnel was part of a now unused railroad, 20 miles outside of Pittsburgh. People go there a lot for pictures these days, especially since Instagram became popular. The tunnel's covered in colorful graffiti and it's overgrown with trees and vines. It's actually an amazing spot. But after my last trip there, I refused to ever go back. I went out one spring day for an engagement shoot. The couple had specifically chosen the tunnel and I was familiar with it, so I agreed. We did a few other sites first, and then I met them out there late in the afternoon for the best lighting. We picked a good spot and started working. Everything was running smoothly at first, until we started hearing the sounds. They were coming from somewhere inside the tunnel. It was long enough that it was dark in the middle, so we couldn't see anything past a few hundred yards. But we could hear some noises, like something or someone was moving around in there. We tried to ignore it, and I just kept taking pictures. But the noises got louder, as if whatever was creating them was coming closer to us. The couple was now more uncomfortable, and they looked tense in the pictures. So I suggested wrapping it up, but they wanted to finish. I got in another 10 shots before we heard the growling. I stopped shooting, and we all stared into the tunnel, petrified. I'd been operating under the assumption that there was a small animal in there, like a raccoon or a possum. The sounds had been unsettling, but not actually concerning. But the growling meant something very different. It sounded large and threatening. At the very least, a stray dog or maybe even a coyote. But given the growling, it clearly didn't like us in the area. We were very isolated out there, so aside from our cars, we had no means of protection or self-defense. With a quick discussion, we decided to leave and go to a backup location. I started packing my lenses as they went to their car. My hands were shaking as I packed. The growling continued and sounded as if it was getting closer and closer, along with now a scraping sound. Panicked, I grabbed my stuff and ran for the car. I got in and immediately locked the doors. The couple was already pulling out, but I had parked facing the other way and needed to turn around. As I did, there was a brief second where my running lights shone into the tunnel entrance. In that second, I saw it, the source of the sound. It was huge, definitely not a stray dog, and many times larger than a German Shepherd. And it was standing on its hind legs, although it was bent forward awkwardly. Even bent forward, it was nearly 7 feet tall. The head was covered in thick fur, and it had dog-like ears sticking up on the top of its head. I couldn't see the features clearly because it was too far away, but I saw the eyes. They reflected in the light this disturbingly deep orangish red color. It made my hair stand up on the back of my neck. As I made my turn, it opened its mouth in a growl. I couldn't hear it inside the car, but I could imagine it. I had absolutely no idea what I was seeing. But it walked on 2 legs. Then I blinked, and it was gone. On autopilot, I followed the couple for 10 minutes to a park that they had also suggested. When we got out, I asked them if they had seen the thing in the tunnel, but they said they hadn't. I debated telling them exactly what it was, but it sounded too crazy. Even though they had heard the growling, I knew they would not understand what I had seen. So I told them I wasn't sure what I saw. We finished their session as fast as we could. A few days later, I was sorting through their photos and I got to those tunnel photos. Most of them were normal, but although as I had predicted, most were not usable because they were too tense and uncomfortable in their poses. I looked through them carefully, trying to find the best ones to include, not wanting the location to be a total loss. In the last few images, I saw something weird. It looked like a glare or a light flare over the guy's shoulder. I zoomed in and played with the lighting until I saw it more clearly. It was not a lens flare. It was eyes, 2 orange eyes in the darkness of the tunnel. They appeared in each of the last 10 photos, and it was proof of what I had seen. The creature in the tunnel was real. My heart was pounding as I started removing the photos from their package. I couldn't include those, not knowing what it was behind them. As I removed the last photo, I spotted something else unusual. Not inside the tunnel, but off to the side. There were trees on both sides of the tunnel. They'd grown up around it since the tunnel had been abandoned. And there, on the side, just near the entrance, was something brown. It looked like an arm. I zoomed in once again and saw that it was clearly an arm and a hand, long and lightly hairy, tipped with curved claws. There had been 2 of them. I'm 20 years old, just starting college and trying to stay focused on studies. With everything going on in the world, I'm just trying to lay low, save up money, and pursue school to get a good degree. Right now, I'm living with my mom and dad on their ranch out here in Montana, where they have tons and tons of horses. But that's not what my story is about. I've been a huge listener of your show for quite some time, and in the past 6 months, I too have had my own share of craziness going on. I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would be dealing with anything remotely like what you talk about, but somehow I seem to be stuck in this situation that I can't find my way out of. Even my parents can't deny what's going on. Everything is centered around our horses. We have horses of our own, but there are also plenty of wild horses in the area. And that's what I believe everything is centered around. All the horses in general. So let me break it to you. We have, from what I've seen and from my understanding, a small clan or village or a group. I don't know what you want to call it, but there's a small family of Bigfoot that live in this area. I've seen them many times. They've tried to sneak up on the property before to steal our chickens and just nosy around. They generally mean no harm, but they have a weird, particular liking to our horses. One that almost makes me nervous because if they get too close, I'm worried they're going to try and harm one of the horses. Who knows what they've done to any of the wild horses they've come across. Now also, we have what I believe to be a group of dogmen living in the area as well. I've seen them roaming in the tree lines, large, upright canines. And trust me, they're not werewolves. I don't believe in that kind of Halloween fairy tale nonsense where somebody transforms under the moon. These fit every description of your encounters, as well as Vic Cundiff's. I've been a huge listener of both of your shows for a while, and I've heard enough stories to be able to accurately depict what a dogman actually is. There's no doubt in my mind that that's exactly what I'm dealing with. And here's where it becomes fun. And I put fun in quotes because, well, it's not exactly fun as you would expect. Some of our horses have recently gone missing. That's happened to me since summertime, actually. And we believe that there is a war going on between the dogmen and the Bigfoot. Maybe not a war in the traditional sense of shields and armor and swords, but a war of races and beasts. I don't know if they're trying to claim the horses or the territory or what, but it seems like ever since these dogmen have moved into the area, it's all been about bloodshed. My father's found several dead wild horses torn to pieces. Not torn to pieces, but just torn up. Legs ripped off, head dismembered, slightly eaten on. I'm not exactly sure which species is to blame for that, but sometimes at night we also hear bizarre screaming and roaring. It kind of sounds like two large apes going at it. Not in that way, but I mean over a female or fighting aggressively. Sometimes I'll hear howling over to the east in the valley near us, and then to the left in the opposite direction over in the west. I'll hear loud growling and whooping noises, but it's kind of frightening, to be honest. And this has been going on long enough for my mom and dad to actually see it for themselves. They can't deny it. I can't deny it. We all know all these species exist, and yet we don't really tell anybody because we don't want people to think we're crazy. Sure, come onto our property and see a Bigfoot and a living werewolf all in one. Yeah, we would probably be sent to jail for being complete loons. And while I actually haven't seen the horrors of what's been playing out, my father has seen something horrific. Something that confirms my understanding that these two species of creatures or beings are at war. He was out probably about 1.5 miles from here, close to the valley, where there's a sharp ravine, and he told me he spotted what he called a Bigfoot, or what we know is a Bigfoot. It was making its way up the hillside, but it appeared to be running as if from something. And next, my father describes how this large, incredibly large canine jumped out of nowhere onto this large primate's back and literally tore the back off the thing, wide open. He could visibly see blood from the direction that he was looking. The thing turned around, grabbed this canine, this upright canine, grabbed its neck and its lower back and threw it down the hillside. He could tell that it was severely injured because it was bleeding profusely and just laying there. All the while, he described the noises and the sounds of this ensuing battle as completely horrific, like if you took a Tyrannosaurus from Jurassic Park, a lion, a gazelle, a rhino, and a hippo, and they all made a flurry of horrible animal noises. I know that's not the best description, but that's what he described it to me as. He said it was kind of traumatizing, too. He had never in his life seen anything like it, obviously. That again just further validated what I know. And while my parents aren't exactly believers in cryptids, they can't deny that this stuff is happening. My father, too, also said that he's heard other noises like that, like a bunch of animals fighting in other areas off the ranch, far off beyond being able to see fully. Now, the real story comes down to, are they contesting for the territory? Are they contesting for the animals and the horses? Or the scariest part is, are they contesting for us? Even though both species have never bothered us, or have made an attempt to be hostile towards us, or even come up to our house, just them being in the area makes me kind of nervous. You know, before, like I said, the Bigfoot have attempted to steal our chickens, and they've even peeked through our windows, even though I haven't seen it. But my mother has, and it nearly scared her half to death. I have a feeling that they have been in this area longer than my family, and they're probably just more curious and trying to survive. But something about these dogmen, having moved into the area for whatever reason, I'm not sure. Probably food. I can't say much about the deer population, but as I stated previously, there is a huge population of wild horses all around here, and I think that brings sufficient food for both species. To what degree and to what extent, I'm not sure, but it must be somewhat significant for the species to be warring with each other. As I'm writing this to you, December of 2020, this is still going on, with activity as close as the other night, when we were outside and heard sounds of screaming, a roaring battle, At least that's what it sounded like in the same valley that my father saw the gruesome scene back in July. This valley is only a few miles northeast of our house, and it's a rather large valley that my father has hunted bucks on before. But since all of this is going on, I think my father just altogether skipped hunting season. Like I said about the deer population, I don't know how good they are, but I do know from my father that bucks liked to come to the area from the east. And maybe since the fall, he hasn't really seen any of them. And normally he sees about 5 or 6 good ones come through. Maybe the dogmen are getting these bucks. Maybe the Sasquatch are hunting them. We're not entirely sure, but what we do know is we try to stay as safe as possible and mind our own business and not wander off into territory that we know is clearly not ours. Because I believe that sooner or later, something will happen to us if we act up. I feel somewhat responsible for my family's safety. I know I'm only 20, and I have a good amount of money saved up. I'm even building credit. I can definitely get a place out closer to town, but I just feel like if I'm leaving my parents, I'm leaving them vulnerable. Not that they couldn't handle the situation or take care of it. I want to take care of them and help them out. So I figured laying low here and pursuing online school is still my best option. And with the pandemic going on now, it gives me more of an excuse to lay low and to help inform my parents and make sure they stay safe. Even that day back in July when my dad saw the Bigfoot and the Dogman fighting, I'm pretty sure that that was because he had wandered too far. And I hope that he wasn't marked at all by either of the groups, and that neither of them saw him and they don't have it out for him. I don't think so. I mean, not that he wandered too far. He knows his way well around the woods. I just mean to them that he wandered too far into their territory. Maybe that's potentially why they're fighting. But all of this is just speculation. I don't really know. I'm going to go ahead and cut this email short because I feel like it's getting long. I'm sort of saying the same things over and over, but I just wanted to make sure you understood. So all I ask is that you wish me luck and that you hope that my family can survive however long this is going to last. From what little research I've done and what I've heard from other people having similar experiences, it's that the Bigfoot and the Dogmen eventually give up and they leave the area. For me, I would actually prefer that the Bigfoot are the ones that don't leave, considering they're not the ones who are overly aggressive and trying to kill the other species. Please wish us luck.